My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president.
He was loved in Georgia and by a lot of Democrats, and now he's gone to the great peanut farm in the sky, Jimmy Carter. Passing on at 100 years of age. Rest in peace, number 39. James Earl Carter, former president and a great human being after his presidency, as we recognized in the first hour today. All of his work with Habitat for Humanity and his local church. Be a lot of tributes to Jimmy Carter. It's Mike Opelka in for Chris Plant on the Chris Plant Show, getting things fired up on this Monday. Yes, yesterday the news broke that the 39th president of the United States had passed away. Jimmy Carter had not been well for some time now. He was a remarkable warrior against cancer. If you've followed Jimmy Carter's battle, the guy was fighting cancer through his late 80s and through his 90s, and continued throughout most of that battle to teach Sunday school in the church that he and Rosalind had attended for so long. A remarkable man in his faith and his commitment to community service. You cannot take that away from Jimmy Carter. I was never a giant fan of his presidency, and so we will honor the man and not necessarily the politician, and truly isn't that the way things should be. As I said, it is the final Monday of 2024, and we will be looking back on this year, not just on the life of Jimmy Carter, but on this year, and looking at some of the crazy stuff that happened today, especially focusing on the media. The mainstream media and its forgetfulness. They kind of forgot what the whole journalism thing was about. So we're going to talk about that, and we will attempt to get all of it in. There's just so much media malpractice that needs to be addressed. And plus some of the craziness over the weekend. There were some Sunday show magic moments that happened yesterday on the Sunday news talk shows before the word broke that James Carter had passed away. We also heard, and these things happen in threes, we are told. We heard that Greg Gumbel of CBS and NBC Sports and just sports in general had passed away, a guy that started in my hometown of Chicago, his hometown of Chicago, Chris's hometown of Chicago, was known to be a real gentleman in the world of sports broadcasting. And actress Linda Lavin, who maybe you remember from the 70s TV show Alice, also passed away this weekend. So they do happen in threes, apparently. These things happen in threes. We did get the phones up and rolling today, so I'm going to take a couple of quick calls here, especially from people who've been hanging on to remember Jimmy Carter. I also remember Jimmy Carter's brother, Billy Carter. Billy Carter, who passed away at the age of 51. So Jimmy lasted almost twice as long as his brother Billy. Billy was the guy behind Billy Beer. A beer company said, hey, I bet we get that guy to sell beer. And they did for a year, and they sold a lot. In fact, at the gas station that Billy Carter ran in Plains, Georgia, he opened it up in 1972. At the gas station where he was pumping gas and selling beer, they sold 2,000 cases of beer a month while Billy Beer was available, and more than 40,000 gallons of gas. But Billy Carter, who also served in the military, he was a Marine. Jimmy was in the Navy. Billy didn't make it past 51. He didn't look particularly healthy. All right, let's do a couple of quick checks on the phones here. Bob is in Waldorf, Maryland. Hello, Bob. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Happy New Year. I bet he did sell a lot of beer as long as those gas lines were back then. I mean, you might as well sell a bunch of beer. Do you remember the gas lines? You had to go get gas on even and odd days to get gas under under Jimmy Carter because the gas was so, there wasn't any gas. So I don't know if people remember this stuff. I don't know if people remember under Jimmy Carter, 16.5% mortgage rates. Can you imagine that today? You couldn't afford to buy nothing. 16.5%. And don't forget them yellow ribbons wrapped around those trees. You know what those were for, don't you? The Iranians took over our American embassy, held 52 hostages for 400 days, and Jimmy Carter didn't do nothing except put on a sweater while we were all freezing our ass off.
Yes, Bob, you are correct on all of that. And I do remember sitting in the gas lines, and it was even in odd days. My mom had a 0 at the end of her license number, and my dad, I think, had an odd number. So we used to take turns in whose car we had to go fill up on the even and odd days. And of course, I remember people bragging about getting a 12% mortgage. And then you could get prime rates and CDs in the 10, 15, and 16% range. It was crazy. And the most important thing, I think, was the 52 American hostages who were held 444 days in Iran. There was one attempt that failed to get our hostages back. They were not released until the swearing in of Ronald Wilson Reagan. And then the message was sent, absolutely sent and received. Thank you, Bob, for that. Let's check in with Manny in Columbia, Maryland. Hello, Manny.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, and I'm happy that finally President died, because he killed my country. I fled from the regime that President Carter established in Iran. He destroyed 2 friendly countries in the Middle East that were friends of the United States, Israel and Iran. And he destroyed it. I'm not saying it because it's just a said, but it's the CIA declassified documents in the Library of Congress that tells the whole story of how President Carter, with his friend, decided to get rid of Iran and establish Khomeini, the Islamic regime that has destroyed Iran and Iranian people and has destroyed their friendship.
Monty,
I want Americans to know that.
Well, there's a very educated audience here on the Chris Plant Show, and I know that you know it very personally, but you said you fled Iran when the Shah was forced out and the theocracy came in and took over?
Yeah, theocracy was established by Mr. Carter because the Shah was not willing to give the British free oil. And so, therefore, they had to get rid of the Shah. And who are they going to establish in Iran? The regime of Islam that Iranian people had gotten rid of. And they established them back into Iran.
Manny, correct me if I'm wrong, but back before the mullahs were brought in and the theocracy was established, Tehran looked more like New York City and Madison Avenue. Women were dressed in the modern clothing of the day. There were shops. There were discotheques. It was much more like a Western city than it was the Sharia city it is today. Am I correct?
At that time, I had graduated from University of Southern California and gone home to Iran. And I was, at that time, managing director of the Customs Cooperation in Iran. And I was a young woman. And at that time, I was the only woman representing a country in the International Customs Cooperation Council in Brussels. 180 people. I was the only female, and the rest of them were male. And the King of Belgium was surprised. This is what Iran was. Iran has always been a civilized country. Do you know the first proclamation of human rights was written by an Iranian king, Cyrus the Great. And
So
since then, yes.
Would we call him a Persian king, though? Would we not? Not because the Iranian name didn't come until the 40s or the 30s, I believe.
No, I'm sorry. That's why I'm a historian. I have written a book about history of Iranian women. Iran was the name that Zoroaster, the Iranian prophet, who was at the same time when Jehovah was in Israel. He named Iran the land of hospitable people. Is the meaning of the word Iran. It was Iranim. Now we have it has through 5,000 years it has become Iran. And at that time, Persia was one of the provinces of the land of Iran. There were the Persians, the Kurds, the Lurs. I'm from the Lurs, and there were Mazi, and there were all kinds of different people. We have lived together because Zoroaster named the country the land of hospitable people.
The land of hospitable people. Well, Mani, I thank you. I know you're a regular on the Chris Plant Show because I'm a regular too. I thank you for the education on this and for sharing your stories about your home country on this the day that we're marking the passing of Jimmy Carter. Thank you, Mani. Appreciate you being there. Another interesting story about Jimmy Carter. Curry in Georgia. Hello, Curry. Are you in? You're not in Plains, are you?
No, I'm in Albany, Georgia.
Okay.
And my story is that when I was a young man, our next door neighbors were very good friends with the Carters, and to the point to where they would even go up to Washington, D.C. every so often and spend the weekend at the White House with the Carters. Well, one particular day, my dog started barking, and I got up and looked, and in the backyard was Jimmy Carter and his Secret Service men looking at my dad's antique car that he had rebuilt.
Huh. Where is that car now? That's what I want to know, Curry.
Oh, my God. I wish I could tell you, but I'm going to say Chris is on vacation, so I want to get this in. Man, oh, man, it's good to get through and hear your voice.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you, Curry. I appreciate you so much. It's kind of cool to look out in your backyard and see a president and a Secret Service detail wandering around eyeballing your dad's rebuilt classic car. That's a good. Curry, are you still with me? I have one more question.
Yes, it was a 1928 two-door Ford sedan.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Are you an outdoorsman? Did you ever go fishing in the area around where you grew up there?
I was not very good at fishing. I was more of a hunter.
Okay. I just didn't know if you remembered. I think it was 1979. Jimmy Carter was fishing, and his boat was attacked by a hissing rabbit to the point where they had to fight a swimming hissing rabbit off with a paddle, like it was being attacked, like the knights were being attacked in Monty Python and the Holy Grail when the hissing attack rabbit. Yeah, it's one of the weirdest presidential stories out there. But that's a great story about the finding the car. Thank you, Curry. Appreciate you being there. Oh, we have so much to get to today. Yes, there will be Jimmy Carter recollections today. And I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I do want to make sure we tell the truth. That's kind of the responsibility we have. But, this is the mourning phase for the Carter family. And there will be a funeral tribute in D.C. on January 9th. We'll get to all those details. But we also have to talk about some of the media malpractice of the year. It's Mike Opelka in for Chris Plant on The Chris Plant Show.
Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at washingtontimes.com/Chris.
It is the Chris Plant Show, and Mike Opelka in for my friend Chris Plant. We are paying tribute to the 39th President of the United States. James Earl Carter passed away yesterday at the age of 100. I was not a fan of Jimmy Carter. I just want to put that out here right now. I was a fan of his post-election, post-presidential work, not his post-election work. I suffered through the Carter era, and then happily welcomed in the Reagan era. But a lot of you have stories, which is really kind of interesting to me, that so many of this audience has a connection to Jimmy Carter, including the guy who just called and talked about Carter showing up in his backyard with the Secret Service detail looking at the 1928 car that his dad had rebuilt. Kind of a funny one. And I'm not trying to play Can You Top This, but the calls are coming in fast and furiously. Ed in Fayetteville, Arkansas is with us. Hello, Ed. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Oh, Michael, glad to get in touch with you.
My pleasure, sir. You have a personal connection to the late Jimmy Carter?
Yes. Back in 1980, Jimmy Carter's change in civil service policies allowed me to get fired from my job with Social Security. I got railroaded out of the job, basically. But that allowed me to work on the Reagan campaign and get Jimmy Carter fired.
Turnabout is fair play.
My job back.
Wow. Yeah, Jimmy Carter.
To think it was
Jimmy Carter did some things in terms of deregulation that he actually gets some props for doing when it comes to the airline industry and the railroad industry. But there are a lot of people that had some problems with Jimmy Carter. But he got you fired from Social Security, but then you could work on the Reagan campaign so he could be fired. I see. You completed the circle, Ed. That was very good.
Yes, I like to think it was the letter I wrote to Reagan's new Secretary H&HS, Schweiker, that detailing my problem, because a couple of weeks after that, I got a letter from the Social Security, the people handling my appeal, saying, we don't appreciate you contacting the secretary. But then a couple of weeks after that, they said, my union rep contacted me, said, well, they want to give you your job back.
See, write a letter, people. Don't just be mad. Write a letter. Your voice can be heard. Well done, Ed. Very well done. Nice story. Nice story indeed. I want to get to as many of these as we can, but I also want to share some of the crazy media moments of the past year. Our buddy Tom Elliott over at Grabian has teed up some of the best. As a matter of fact, the 10 best. And we'll share them with you. Media malpractice is in the crosshairs. And it's almost enough for 2 shows. So we'll try and scoot through them as quickly as possible. Of course, the phone number here is 888-630-9625, 888-630-9625. Deep fakes, democracy at risk, and Beyonce is in the building. Yeah, those are just 3 of the big lies from the media this year. It's Opelka in for Plant on the Chris Plant Show. It is the Chris Plant Show, and it's Mike Opelka. That's me sitting in front of my buddy Chris Plant. He will return next Monday, but this is the final Monday of 2024, and we're attempting to get to everything. It is a giant buffet of stories for us to cover, including the fact that Donald Trump has filed an amicus brief, or amicus brief, depending on how you pronounce your Latin, to ask the Supreme Court not to cancel TikTok. And I'm not a TikTok guy. I don't have TikTok on my phones or my computer because I look at it as a threat from China. And until such time as they're fully divested from their connections to China, I won't be using it. Now, I know Mr. Trump says the social media outlet helped him during the election. I'm still not buying it. I'm very, very concerned about China and their fingers in everything. So I'm not a TikTok guy, and we'll see what's happening on that. And I'm also nervous about what's going on in other areas of the world with China. We were having a discussion about this yesterday, about how China goes in with their Belt and Road initiatives and helps build infrastructure and buildings and ports, and then tells the countries, we'll loan you the money. And then when they can't make the payments, China exerts its influence and puts its control over those places. Like the Panama Canal, for example. It occurs to me that I believe it was Jimmy Carter who sold the canal for $1 to Panama. That's one of the things that Donald Trump is trying to undo and to try and reassert American control over the Panama Canal, although I think Donald Trump's trying to do a couple of things. I think he's attempting to get a better deal for American businesses and American military using the canal, and he's trying to keep China out of there. I don't think I'm alone on this. I think Joe in Dundee, Illinois, who I believe is listening on the great WLS, might be in the same area here when I'm talking about this. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Mike. My whole point is that Trump either needs to invite the Panamanian president to the White House and try to make him see our way of thinking. This is a military asset, the Panama Canal. If you need to get ships out of San Diego into the Atlantic, we don't want the Chinese controlling this.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
And I heard that they can't get a carrier through there, so we might have to put some improvements in that area. If you need 25 warships coming through the canal in a week, China might give us one a month.
It just can't be that China is controlling.
We dug the canal, Mike.
Yeah, we dug it. We cannot have China, and Donald Trump points out the 38,000 Americans who died during the construction of the canal. But you bring up a really important point. I wonder how long it's been since we've done a serious upgrade to the Panama Canal, and it might be time to make sure that the capacity of the canal matches the size and scope of the traffic that's going through it. So that is an important thing. But, yeah, that's a military asset, and it is something that I know everybody's saying, well, you can't give somebody something and then take it away. You can if it's a threat, if suddenly an enemy is taking over. And I'm sure that Donald Trump is opening the negotiation by raising this question. We've seen Canada suddenly send 2 finance ministers to Mar-a-Lago. And we talked about it late last week with Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, who is a Canadian, coming down to Mar-a-Lago to make sure he's helping Donald Trump with the talks as relates to Canada. And just oddly enough, the Greenland talks. Over the weekend, Greenland was hit with a massive blackout. The entire country was without power, and it was like 17 degrees below zero. So Donald Trump has a whole bunch of things he's trying to negotiate, and I think a lot of this has to do with strategic negotiation for economic safety and for our country's safety. And we can't forget, Joe, that that section of Panama is also important to traffic going up to our southern border. So it's not just about the ships, it's about access to America as well. Really good point. Thank you for being there. Appreciate all of that. All right, let me do one of these great clips from our friends at Grabien. Tom Elliott puts together incredible stuff every week, pretty much every week. Keeping an eye on the media, and this is part of the top 10 journalistic malpractice moments of 2024, the deep fakes.
There's a growing and insidious trend in right-wing media, broadcast, print, and social media. It is to take highly misleading and selectively edited videos of President Biden directly from Republican National Committee social media accounts and then use those videos to spread messages virally to cast doubt on President Biden's fitness for office. Here is this headline from the New York Post, quote, Biden appears to freeze up, has to be led off stage by Obama. at Megabucks LA fundraiser. The full video, posted by Biden finance chair on Twitter, shows something entirely different. Biden reacting to applause and then walking off stage with former President Obama.
Well, if you took a real look at it, Nicole Wallace, you would actually see Joe was frozen. He looked like he was less limber than the audio animatronic president in the Hall of Presidents. Sure looked like it. But wait, there's more on the deep fakes from Nicole Wallace.
It comes less than 1 week after the New York Post made a cover out of another piece of deceptively edited tape, calling him Meanderer-in-Chief due to what they claim was Biden walking away during a skydiving demonstration during the G7 summit last week. Biden was going over to congratulate one of the skydivers. The articles are based on cheap fakes, videos of real events that are intentionally manipulated to fool viewers.
No. The Meanderer-in-Chief moment in France truly was a unique moment, and you saw the Italian president have to go retrieve Biden as he appeared to be wandering off when the shiny thing, meaning the parachute, was being gathered up by the guy who had just completed the jump. It really is obvious when you pay attention, but the media couldn't be honest. They couldn't be truthful with us. In fact, they also kept telling us that if Donald Trump is elected, democracy itself is at risk.
There's a lot of criticisms of Trump that he is bad for democracy, that he's bad for American democracy.
Okay. We are a republic.
We're a republic.
We are not a democracy.
Representative Republican. We're not a democracy.
I've heard a lot of conspiracy theories. I hear a lot of things out on the road. But to hear Americans, people who would describe themselves as patriots, say that America is not a democracy, that stopped me in my tracks.
You are hearing people say America is not a democracy because there are people around Trump who want them to be saying that, who've been planting that narrative.
Yeah, we're also not a democracy. We are a representative republic, and it's kind of simple the way that works. And if we were a pure democracy, we would just have mob rule. Now, some of the left would like that until you have an election like this one. When the president wins the popular vote, then they would want to repeal that as well. Yeah, that was number 9 on the Tom Elliott Grabian top 10 journalistic malpractice moments. Let me give you one more here. This is maybe one of my favorites. It's number 8, and it is the great Beyonce lie from the campaign trail.
There are rumors that Beyonce might make an appearance. I personally think that that's true.
Is the United Center going to be turning into the Beehive tonight?
The Beehive is buzzing right now because the preparation for the Beehive, it has to start early.
A donor confirmed to me that she's also hearing that Beyonce is en route.
Beyonce is going to show up. Queen Bey.
Yeah, it was an abuse of journalistic power by all of the mainstream media who wanted people to stay tuned in because they wanted you to believe Beyonce was going to perform. And the whole thing was Bravo Sierra was a giant lie. And that's only number 8. We'll get to more of these journalistic malpractice moments from 2024. I want to get to more of the Jimmy Carter memories from those of you calling in on the Chris Plant Show. It's 888-630-9625. Dewey is in Geneva, Illinois. Hello, Dewey. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I grew up, I turned 18 in 1980, so I got to vote for Ronald Reagan and fire Jimmy Carter. But while we're remembering him, his brother Billy was brewing the beer. I think you mentioned it earlier. And I heard a story back in the day that there was a dance contest down in Georgia, and the couple that won first prize got a case of Billy beer. And then second place was 2 cases of Billy beer.
Oh, I see what you did there. Yeah, actually, the Billy beer didn't happen until 1977, and then it was only out for 1 year. Really, they only made Billy beer for 1 year because people kind of grew tired of Billy Carter and his shenanigans. And but it's kind of interesting. My late brother Chris used to have a beer can collection, and one of his prized prize cans was the Billy Beer can. I never had the opportunity to taste it. I'm betting, since it was brewed not in Milwaukee, where so many great beers were brewed, it was brewed somewhere in Kentucky at the time. Probably wasn't one of the great American beers, Dewey. Just saying, my guess. But thanks for being there. Glad you were 18 and got to vote for Reagan in 1980. Excellent. Let's get one more in here. Check in with John in South Carolina. Hello, John. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Michael. How you doing?
I'm good, sir. You have a Jimmy Carter memory you want to share with us?
Well, it's yeah, I do. When my wife was born in 1974, and when Jimmy Carter was campaigning back then, she lived in a town called or a city, Lorain, Ohio. And it was a real big industrial city, a lot of steel mills and shipbuilding and auto industry, but a lot of that, because of the times, was closing down. So he, of course, was campaigning in that area, for whatever year it was. I think it was around 75. But anyway, my wife was a baby. She was an infant, like a year old, maybe a little older, a little younger. Of course, she doesn't recall, but her mother was in a crowd at a shopping center with my wife, who was the baby, holding her in her arms, and she was there, and Jimmy Carter was coming through the crowd, and he actually picked up my wife and kissed her on the cheek. We wish we had photos of it, but at that time, people didn't carry telephones and cameras with them anywhere. But I thought that was a pretty neat thing that my wife, my beautiful wife, Rory, was held by Jimmy Carter.
Well, how about that?
And kissed on the cheek.
Kissed by a president, and not in a scandalous way. That's a good thing. There may be. And he lived to be 100 years old. So, hopefully he blessed her and she's going to live, that long. Who knows? I hope so, John. I hope that happens for you. That's a good memory. That's a good presidential memory. He was a candidate at the time. I'll bet you if there's a Lorain, Ohio newspaper, they might have photos of that day in the archives, and you might be able to find that moment, which would be a very cool thing to have. I'm squeezing in one more here, John. Thank you. Let's get Jeff in Stevens City, Virginia. Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
I'm good, sir. You got a Jimmy Carter memory?
Well, my memory isn't a good one, but my girlfriend and I were sitting on the sofa watching Jimmy Carter come on TV because we were responsible adults, and he told us to turn our thermostats down to 68 degrees, and she said, we better do it, and I'm like, oh, man. And so we did. We froze, and my neighbor across the street, I go into his house. It's cranked up. He goes, I work outside. I'm not freezing. And then we met at the mailbox a week later or so, opened up our power bills, and his was $3 higher than mine. And I told my girlfriend, I am not freezing for $3.
Yeah, I'd gladly pay the $3 surcharge. That was one of those bits, Jimmy Carter telling every American, you got to turn your thermostat down to 66. And he put on like a cable knit sweater and did an address from the Oval Office. And the next week was the week SNL actually had Dan Aykroyd on an exercycle, running the power like a rat on a wheel, trying to get the power generated for the White House. Yeah, that was a big deal back during the Carter administration, telling everybody you can't keep your house as warm as you want it to. You have to do it for the country. And it was $3. Good memory, Jeff. Appreciate you being there. Thank you so much. It is the Chris Plant Show. My name's Mike Opelka, sitting in for my friend Chris Plant. We're covering the news. We're also going over the Jimmy Carter stories. And there is one of them that affected a friend of mine when it relates to the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan and Jimmy Carter putting his foot down. I'll share this one with you. It ended up being a pretty rough turn for my buddy, but he turned it into a really good thing for his life. It's Opelka in for Plant on the Chris Plant Show. It is the Chris Plant Show. Mike Opelka, my name, in for my friend Chris Plant. We are trying to cover all the news today, and there is news on a Monday, the last Monday of 2024, as well as a look back at some of the media malpractice from the last year. We'll get to more of that. And folks are sharing Jimmy Carter stories as the 39th president of the United States has passed away at the age of 100. And I have said repeatedly I wasn't a fan of his presidency. I thought the guy was a very good human being in his post-presidential life with Habitat for Humanity and his great work in his own church. Through his battle against brain cancer, a remarkably strong individual with that. But there is a story that I think is connected to Larry in Fort Worth. I have a friend who remembers very clearly where he was when Jimmy Carter decided that he was not only unhappy about the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan, but he was going to do something about this. Larry, you remember this story, don't you? Are you with me, Larry?
At the time. Are you there?
Yeah, I got you. I was saying you remember the Afghanistan story and what Jimmy Carter did after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I remember when Jimmy Carter boycotted our Olympians going to Moscow in the Summer Olympics of 1980. And so that was something, very significant in American history and world history.
Yeah, I have a buddy who was very young at the time. He was 18 or 19 years old, and he had just qualified to be on the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team. And he was planning on going, and he was one of the people they thought was going to medal. He was that good. And he said to this day he recalls everything about the day when they got the call saying, "You're not going. It's not going to happen." Because, your life as a weightlifter isn't that long. You don't have that big of a career. And he then turned out to be a great writer. His name is Jim Stovall, and he has written more than 70 books, 9 of which have been turned into movies, and he is a public speaker. So he did manage to change gears, but he remembers it like it was yesterday. But you also have a Billy Carter story, I'm told?
Yes, I do. My late mother, God bless her, and I, it was a local shopping mall here in the mid-cities, suburb of Fort Worth. Well, anyway, Billy Carter showed up. He was one of the guests, honored guests, to help open up a new section of the mall at the time. The other honored guest was Jim Davis, who played Jock Ewing on Dallas. This was back in 1978.
Talk about big celebrities. Billy Carter and Jock Ewing opening a new section of the mall in Fort Worth. That's a great story. It's Mike Opelka for Chris Plant on The Chris Plant Show.